earlier. Not sure where he's at. We on? Okay, perfect. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the Roy City Council Working Session Agenda. This is for June 1st, 2001 at 4:30 p.m. I want to recognize that we have Councilmember Saxton, we have Councilmember Burrell, we have Councilmember Wilson, we have Councilmember Jackson, and we have Councilmember Paul. So we have a full quorum tonight. We appreciate you being here. We're going to have a discussion tonight dealing with the proposed fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. So it should be a good discussion. I think, Camille, you're going to lead off in the conversation. And council, if you have questions or thoughts or something, let's go ahead and put those ideas, comments into the discussion for Camille to help us through, okay? So with that, who would like to start with some questions if you have them? If you know, I sent you some copies of mine, and we can surely start with mine. But if you have some, please, let's have Camille help us through that process.
Great. Mayor and Council, it's always great to be with you. The budget is an exciting time of year. It's the biggest time of year for all of us to make sure that you understand what we have recommended as priorities and to make sure that we answer all of your questions so that they're in place for you to hold a public hearing the next council meeting on June 15th and tentatively approve the budget so that we can operate effective July 1st for the next fiscal year. So as the mayor said, we really appreciate your comments, your questions, your feedback. We'll go through some of them. If you have any additional questions, let us know, but Matt and I will try to answer all of your questions. And hopefully there will be time at the end. If you have additional questions, we can make sure we get those all answered for you. So the fiscal year 2022 general fund budget for the revenue, as we've discussed previously, taxes are the biggest portion of our revenue. The major categories of tax revenue are property tax, sales tax, franchise tax, the paramedic aboard fee, and motor vehicle taxes. So with that, some of our taxes, we have seen increases in the past year. We have seen increased utility costs as more people are working from home during COVID-19 and a few things like that. So while the franchise tax revenue may have some trends that it's increasing at this point, it's not a material increase. And based on the power company, the electric company, there's different places and organizations that control their rates. We don't anticipate that they're going to increase their rates. We haven't heard. So we have kept some of those revenues flat in the budget because we don't see a material increase happening, even if we receive some one-time additional revenue from that. We wanted to break down sales tax. Councilmember Paul asked if we go into more detail. So this is a typical month of sales tax. I took this off the last month of sales tax that we received. So our direct point of sale revenue is $435,622. Of that, $304,000 was collected at a physical location within Roy City. So someone went into a restaurant or a grocery store and purchased something within the city. $30,000 of that comes from utilities, telecom, internet sales tax. $101,000 came from internet-based sales outside of Roy. We also get that 50% distribution. There's some different things that the state does, some fees and different things that they take out. So our net share of the statewide distribution was around $264,000. So that brought that month's sales tax to $699,805. So of that $435,622 direct point of sale, 69.85, so around 70%, comes from locations within Roy City. 23% comes from internet sales based outside of Roy. The delivery location was Roy.
What's the time frame on this?
This was 1 month. This is
The typical month.
yes. And we don't see a huge change. The physical location within Roy is increasing over the internet sales, but it's a small amount. It's not a material change that we've been seeing with that. It is growing, but this is a typical month. This is what we typically see month over month. The amounts may change. We have certain times of the year that obviously November for the day after Thanksgiving sales and things like that we see a higher sales tax. So the numbers may change, but the percentages stay fairly consistent month to month.
Camille, on that net share of statewide local distribution, and that is based on our population?
Yes.
Is that correct?
So the state takes the statewide point of sale and they take our population. They have a process that then they look at 50% and give us that amount. Then they take an additional 50%. So we end up with about 75%. And then they subtract some fees and different things that they, like a homeless shelter funding deduction, there's emergency food agencies. So that's the net amount we receive after we get that 50% and they take out some of those other line items.
But it's basically based on our population.
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting point because we looked at data before and the data showed about a 70-30 split. This suggests is we're getting closer to a 50-50 split
Yes.
in terms of point of sale versus sale in terms of by population.
Yeah, that's where it says direct point of sale within Roy, 69.85%. That seems, maybe I'm not understanding the calculation, but if I look at physical location within Roy, 304,000, and then you look at net share of state, local distribution, 264, they're a lot closer than 69.85%.
So the 70% is of that direct point of sale line at the top.
Yeah.
So it's 70% of the 435,622.
Right.
Even though some of that's internet sales based outside of Roy. So if I was comparing physical within Roy versus what we get from the net share, it's 304 to 264.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, yeah, and that's important to understand. What I want to draw your attention to this comment, that's a pretty good significant portion when you're talking about internet sale into the total sales tax we're getting, because we're talking about all sales tax, however that's being generated. And you're talking about, because we get that from, if you break it out to grocery stores, to gasoline, I mean, there's a gauntlet of different types of ways that's collected. I think you'll find that number is probably matches pretty close to groceries on that list, probably groceries that we sell almost even. And then everything else. I mean, you've got convenience stores, you got sporting goods. I mean, they break all that stuff down, but that's a pretty good piece of the sales tax coming in just on internet sales. I think the secret would be is to watch that over the next few months, maybe a couple of years, and see if that's growing. My impression is I'm sure seeing an awful lot of those smiley faces with the Prime on it. Those trucks are everywhere. And it seems to me a lot of people are using the internet, and obviously we're getting a piece of that action. So that's interesting. I don't know if the numbers, if you can tell us the numbers, because I don't see the numbers, but let's go back to a question that was asked in that meeting, Joe. What is the percentage, in your opinion, then between the total sales tax, how much that was given to Roy City as a consequence of the point of sale, and how much of that total sales tax was a consequence of population? Best guess.
Yes, it is about 50% is given to us based on the statewide point of sale.
Okay, so we're literally that moved from about a 7-30 to a 50-50 now. And that just happened because we pulled the numbers back in October, and the numbers actually showed it more around 70-30. So that shift is taking place through this pandemic. It might be interesting if it holds. Thank you.
That goes into why we have been so up in the air during this current fiscal year and going into next fiscal year. They have had stimulus money and we've seen transitions in sales, and we don't have any traditional history to look at to forecast this. And that's why we're conservative when we bring you numbers that we expect sales tax to increase by about 10% next year. But we also don't want to overestimate and not meet the goals. So this goes into that exact challenge that trends are changing.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like that.
Justice court revenue. I wanted to go a little bit more into justice court revenue. So the state of Utah assesses a surcharge on all criminal fines, penalties, and forfeitures. So 90%, there's a 90% surcharge on conviction of felony, Class A misdemeanors, the list goes on. We have certain things that 90% of the surcharge goes back to the state of Utah. There's a 35% surcharge on other offenses that we also send to the state of Utah. So this includes violations of county or municipal ordinances and anything that's not subject to the 90% surcharge. So a portion of the revenue we collect in the Justice Court, whether we're acting as Roy City or for Weber County or Hooper, goes to the state. And monthly we do a report and send them based on what type of conviction it was, we send them that fine. We also have an agreement with Weber County where we run the court for them, that we receive 50% of the net citation fees collected on their behalf. So this is net of what they have to send to the state. So the intent of the court is not to make money, and it does not. The court is here to process those fines. If we were only operating Roy City's court, I'm sure it would be at a loss as well. That's not the intent, is for us to make money on that. But where we do Weber County and West Haven's courts as well, in reality it offsets part of that loss and helps us to come closer to a break-even point. And that's the case, I would assume, with most justice courts. I don't know of a justice court that makes money, and like I mentioned, that's not the point of the justice court. We don't want it to be a money-making
But it helps us
endeavor.
that we do the others, right?
Fund balance. I want to talk a little bit more about fund balance and how we calculate it. So fund balance is a calculation based on our excess assets over liabilities. So just as with your personal savings and checking account, when you receive your income from your job, you pay all of your bills, the amount you have left goes into your savings, and you have that to pay for things in the future. The same is true with the city. So every year, the excess revenue that we have over the expenditures goes into fund balance. And then we can use that for capital projects. We can use that in a case like now with an uncertain economy. If we need to draw on that fund balance, we have that savings account. The technical term is fund balance. It's the same as a rainy day fund or savings account. You may have heard it called other things, but it all is a fund balance. The state has a limit that our fund balance percentage can be 35%. The council previously set a goal to keep that around 18%, which we have tried to do every year. The fund balance is a calculation. So it's based on our current revenues, how much revenue we collect. So that's why it's so hard to give you a specific number. And I want to go a little more into detail on why that's so hard for me to give you a number at any given point. Where it's a percentage, it can change based on the revenue that we receive as a city. So ending June 30th, 2021, this current fiscal year that we're in, the fund balance could be less than prior years because we received $3 million of CARES Act funding. So we have more revenue, so we're dividing our savings by a higher number. So even though we've tried to be very fiscally responsible this last year, all of the departments have been great at not spending in excess where revenues were so uncertain. There's a chance at year end we could tell you we have a lower fund balance because of that bottom denominator that we're dividing by.
It's kind of artificially inflated.
Yes, absolutely. So we still have 3 months of sales tax to collect. And as we previously talked, it's up in the air. We're not sure. And with the timing of our budget, we have to adopt a budget by June 22nd for next year. But we will still have 3 outstanding months of sales tax that we won't see the numbers by June 22nd. We also have personal property. So the taxes that you pay on ATVs or boats or things like that comes into the county in June. So we'll see those numbers after we need to adopt the budget. And there's a chance we could receive American Rescue Act funding by June 30th, which could be a substantial amount. That's still unknown. We haven't seen a set date on when we could receive that. So that's why it's so hard for us to give you an exact percentage of where our fund balance is at. It could change daily based on if we get one of these major revenues in and based on where we're at with our spending in the current year. our goal is to stay around that 18%. So in the fiscal year end budget opening that we will bring to you next council meeting, we will propose a transfer to the capital projects fund, and then we won't actually make that transfer until we've received all of these items. So we wait until around the end of August to really start digging into the numbers and preparing our year-end numbers until we've received these major sales taxes especially. And once we do that, then we can start to see where we're at and do the actual transfer over to the capital projects fund. So the amount we bring you in the budget is just a budget. It's an expectation, a proposal.
It's a
We
guess.
don't know with all these things that are up in the air. So our plan is to keep it around the 18% as we always have, based on previous council direction. But that, I want to explain a little bit more about why it's so hard at any given day for us. We can tell you that day about where we're at, but that doesn't necessarily mean where we'll end up for the year. So it's frustrating not to be able to accurately pinpoint that, but just in the next month, I anticipate that it could change dramatically based on some of these things.
Yeah, and I think, Council, at least, correct me, Camille, you're the expert. The issue really comes down to not so much about where the council sets that 18%. The biggest concern is the ceiling. I've been sitting in a council, this council, where in fact the numbers came in and we were over 25%. And that's violation of state law. So at that time, now this particular legislation, they moved it from 25 to 35, so we have a buffer, a little more. So council, the issue really was and is not to exceed 35%. And so we immediately, upon notification, and Matt, you were probably engaged in that, we immediately went in and simply had to have some budget adjustment to obligate those dollars to get it out of the general, or in this case, I think we referred it to fund balance, to get it back down under 25% because we were violating state law. And so that's the whole purpose of understanding this piece. It's not so much the fact is that 18%, we set that, you set that. That's a good target. Just don't go over the top because it creates some challenges for us and we have to immediately deal with those challenges. So as long as you guys are on top of it, recognizing the American Rescue Plan funds are coming, we'll just deal with it as it comes. But it is an issue and we got to just keep our eyeballs on it. That's it. Okay?
Absolutely.
Thanks,
The
Camille.
reasoning for that is the state wants a pay-as-you-go plan. They want government to have revenue that covers their expenses that year. So the intent is that you have sales tax and property taxes and those type of things to pay each year. They don't want you to stockpile and inflate prices or fees to save up for future years. They want your fees and your tax revenue to be consistent and pay as you go. So that's why they set those limits. The general fund expenditures by department, this pie chart's a little skewed because the general fund also includes Class C roads and transportation infrastructure funding, which are about 2.5 million. So if those weren't included, police and fire, which are the two big categories, the red and the kind of green aqua, on the left would be well over 50%. So you can see where our costs are by department. We showed this in the budget presentation. Just a reminder, the public safety expenses are the yellow gold line on the top, and the property tax values are the red, orange color on the bottom. So there's a difference of about $6 million that we find other funding sources to cover public safety expenses. The other item I want to talk about with revenue is under the new House bill establishing the internal accessory dwelling units, that we may authorize a requirement for business licenses for houses that are rentals. At this time, we don't know how many there are to plan for what that fee would be. So at that time, if council votes to authorize that requirement, we could look at a budget adjustment at that time to see how much revenue that would impact in our business licensing.
Let me make sure we understand that question, Camille. We're talking about the IADU decision. Matt, I think the strategy has, and Steve's here, the planning commission has to present to the city council a proposed adjustment into the ordinance. And the council then decides. And part of that recommendation will come out of the planning commission will be a discussion about, do you want to put business licenses on the IDUs? Do you want to basically restrict the parking? There's some elements within the law that has to be addressed. But that all has to be done by the council by 1 October. And so the planning commission will present it to the council, hopefully before then, and then the council then can make a decision in terms of changing the city ordinance. There is no ordinance in Roy today authorizing auxiliary dwelling units. There, you can have an apartment, a fourplex, a duplex, you have all that stuff. That's there. But this one deals with people actually having an apartment inside of their house. But the law says that we have to allow that to happen this year. But the council then defines the scope and depth of that law under the statute. The only condition is we have to put something in by 1 October. So my question, I think, Camille, would be is it, and you may have said it right, we really don't know how we're going to factor in that because, council, you have to make a decision of whether or not we're going to charge business license fees or not
For them to rent out their basement?
to rent out their basement.
So,
They've
so
been doing it all this time, but it just hasn't been legal.
It's not legal. So, and we know it exists, okay? It's hard to pin it down, but we know it exists. But the point I want to suggest, and the reason for the question in the question set was more about, you got to make that choice. And if you make that choice, then somehow there has to be a budget adjustment to reflect that choice because a certain amount of people will probably come into the city and request under the IDAU law and the new ordinance Roy City will put in place, allowing them the authority now to have one. And if they have one, if you elect to then have a business license, then they have to file and they have to pay for a business license to have one. So it's coming, but I think you said it best. We just don't know, and we'll have to make the adjustment as we get closer.
so the second piece would be who would monitor that and how would that be enforced? That seems really,
You'll make that decision based on a
Cumbersome.
recommendation come from the planning commission. So, but
and what about your children that live with you? I mean, if you
that's
have-
different. Yeah, unless you want to charge them, and that's good.
But many
sometime.
do.
And they do.
I just think the enforcement is going to be a nightmare.
Well, you have to make that choice, but just recognize the fact it gives you authority to do that.
Family, probably a non-issue. If
It's not an ADU under the same family. It's, if it's a different family, or it's not your family, and you're charging them, okay, it's a rental.
Yeah.
The only difference would be is that how do you want to approach that? And again, today, we have no authority to
How
do
if-
that.
If somebody's operating a business without a license. I mean, generally, we don't know about it unless somebody reports it. And once it's reported, then we act upon it.
Exactly. So that's what you'll decide.
So what if somebody had someone living with them for years? Would this go just starting when the law comes down, then
When-
forward? or
When the
what's-
city council approves the ordinance, it now becomes law. Up to that point, it's just illegal, and to be very honest with you, we don't know about it, and we can't find it. I mean, I don't know how to find it, okay? So, and I'm surely not going to do a blood test to determine whether they're family or not family. I mean, they could say they're family, and who would know? It's just really hard, as you suggested, to manage. But we've got to let the planning commission present to us their recommendation, and then from the planning commission, city council make a decision, okay? But that was the question, and it's dealing with page 16 in your book, because that IADU is coming, and it may impact our ability to track business license and business license fees, okay? Or add to them. Okay,
Okay, I'm gonna talk for a minute while Morgan looks to see if she can.
Tries to
if she
figure
can
that,
come on
okay.
down. It's not letting me get it back on with this. One other question that we had was regarding MIDA and the revenue for that. We don't have consistent revenue from them at this point. The revenue that we see is in planning and in business licenses as new businesses come. We have an agreement that eventually we will pay for some public safety and snow removal
Right.
and things like that. At that point in time, we may have more steady revenue sources. But at this point in time, it's still just as they bring in a building permit or as they bring in a business license. So we have been recognizing those as budget openings as they occur. We have brought a couple of those to you already, and that's what our plan is to continue doing that and bringing those in as we see them, so that
Okay.
we're not planning on revenue that we don't know if we'll receive. We're not sure exactly when the next building will be ready for a building permit or when they'll have business licenses ready. So that's the best practice in accounting, is to recognize those unknowns as they come in.
Yeah, there's 3 more buildings in process. They're now occupying 2 of those buildings, I believe. The lab should be done now, but there are 3 more in process, so obviously we'll see that. And if I understand Camille correctly, if our fire department or police department respond, then there's a reimbursement, okay, for services provided there.
Yes.
Okay. Okay,
I'll just keep talking, and once we get the screens up, we'll go with that. Just a clarification, we do have $400,000 for widening of both 4800 South and Midland Drive at the canal crossings. That was in the current year, fiscal year 2021 budget.
Correct.
And we weren't able to get that accomplished this year. So that's rebudgeting it for next year so we can continue with that project.
okay, with that, let me just make sure I understand. Page 28, capital assets. So the fact that you've identified it under capital assets on page 28, table, the second table, then you also identified it on page 26. It's not counted twice, it's just the 400,000 for that project.
Yes,
And
the
a-
capital projects is just a summary.
Okay,
of
it's
all
a
the
summary.
capital.
Okay.
Yes,
It didn't say summary, and that's the reason why I think I got confused. Thank you.
yes.
When are we thinking that's gonna happen?
I'm on Midland Drive, we're this fall. They won't let us touch it until the secondary water's off and everything like that, so.
So this fall, we'll maybe see it when the water stops flowing, they'll be able to get in. We hope to get that one done on Midland, and then a grant for funding will happen next year to be able to do one on 48. That's our plan. Perfect. Thank you, Ross. Okay,
Perfect. Just to clarify, we do have the general employee step system and the public safety employee step system in the budget as well. So the general employees are 2 to 2.5% merit, and the public safety employees are 3.75% merit. We've also included an increase to health insurance. Oh, there we go. Perfect. I don't know why. Let me just try it and see if I can get it just, there we go. Perfect. Thank you. There is a 1.5% increase to the health insurance premiums for employees. The city covers 85.5% of insurance premiums for the employees. We also have an employee assistance program. This is covered by the city. We don't charge the employees anything. This is a benefit provided for by the city. An employee assistance program is a work-based intervention program designed to assist employees with resolving personal problems that may be adversely affecting the employee's performance. So our employee assistance program provides counseling. They can help with financial or legal problems, senior care planning, substance abuse problems, addictions, loss or grief. So that is open to employees to use at any time, and that's a benefit and a program that we've had for them for a number of years. And we appreciate that we have that in there so the employees have that resource.
And I appreciate that. I've been here for quite a few years, and that's the first time I've heard it, so I'm glad you were able to point that out. So personal counseling, addiction, this employee or family?
The employee and their family could go.
Okay, so counseling for both the employee and any family member. How far does that family member go?
I believe just immediate family.
Immediate
Yes.
meaning husband, wife, children, or immediate family meaning mother-in-law, father-in-law?
No,
How
just
far does it go?
No, just dependents.
Just, okay, employee independent. Is that plan, I apologize this, I need to understand it thoroughly. Does that plan also stay with them after they retire, or is it terminated upon them leaving the job?
Yes, it's only only for active employees.
Active, okay. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
The budget included 2 personnel changes, the addition of 2 part-time bailiffs. Currently, we're using full-time sworn police officers to be bailiffs. So allowing 2 part-time bailiffs will allow us to have those officers continue with their regular duties in patrol or detectives and not in here covering court. We also have proposed a firefighter 2/senior paramedic position. This is a reclassification. It's like the police master officer position. So this position would be considered a vertical adjustment. An eligible paramedic would submit a letter to the fire chief detailing why they feel that they are qualified for this position. There will be 7 criteria, and the paramedics would need to meet a minimum of 4 of those 7 criteria to be considered for this position. So this is not new positions in the budget. It would just allow a plan for them to move up throughout the ranks and expand their knowledge and expertise.
Okay, good. Okay, understand now.
The salary survey, we talked a little bit about this in the budget presentation, and we want to go a little more in detail. So to start, we looked at a 2-year non-retirement turnover rate by department. We figured retirements are for other purposes. We wanted to see where we're losing employees for mainly other cities, but to see where they're going for other higher pay or different benefits, and make sure that we understood where we're losing employees because of the salary. We looked at January 1st, 2019 to March 15th, 2021, so just over a 2-year period. Police in that time had about a 7% turnover, fire had about 28%, streets had about 87%, building maintenance had 20%, water had 40%, parks had 16%. So we went back to the original plan for the salary survey. Originally, it was designed to be funded 1/3 of the city every year to look at the proposed salaries and make adjustments. The first departments to be included were Public Works and Parks and Recreation. And based on the turnover rates we just talked about, this is right in line with the departments that right now the city is losing the most employees for more money somewhere else. So with that, in the current budget proposed for fiscal year 2022, we have included Public Works and Parks and Recreation in a salary survey. In year 2, which would be next year's budget, fiscal year 2023, we would anticipate the police department and all of administrative employees that we would do the same deep level of salary survey for them. In year 3, we anticipate the fiscal year 2024 budget, the fire department, and all part-time personnel. I also want to point out that Travis and Ross are not included in this year's proposed salary survey. We felt it was important to get the employees' salary survey adjustments done first, and we'll look at all directors in a future year all together at one time. This salary survey is something that we started working on in January. It is not something that can be done quickly. We have spent a lot of time and effort researching each position, their description, making sure we're comparing to cities, comparing the same position at other cities. So this is an in-depth salary survey. There's not a specific amount across the board. We looked at each position individually in these departments. We compared against the cities in Davis and Weber counties. We didn't want to go outside of this geographical area. We didn't think that was consistent. So the cities that we compared against are all local cities. We want to show you an example. This particular position currently, the adjusted starting wage is $14.55 an hour right now. You can see we looked at all these cities. A few of the cities don't have a similar position. That was the case for every position. Not every city has ones that line up. That's why we took into account the job descriptions. We also, you can see down at the bottom, the average of minimums. We looked at 20% above and 20% below the average. If there was a city that fell as an outlier, we did not consider them. We took them out. This particular job did not have any cities that fell within 20% above or below the average. So the new adjusted average for this position would be $15.58 an hour starting. So instead of $14.55, it would go up to $15.58. We did this with every position, and then we applied that to each person. So within that area, if a person has been here a year, they might not be at that starting wage. So we took the same percentage and applied that across the board. So we have gone through, as I said, we've taken about 3.5 months to go through these two departments and do an in-depth salary survey. So those are included in the budget, and we recommend that we start implementing that and continue that. That's, as department directors, our strongest recommendation for you in this budget is that we take this into account. Based on those turnover rates, we are losing employees for higher wages elsewhere, and this would be a huge tool to help us start to combat the recruitment and retention issues that we're facing.
How much?
How much?
You've already done, your document says a comprehensive salary survey were completed during the spring of 2021 analysis of salaries. So what is the increase that is going to be in the budget to cover all of this for both Public Works and Rec?
Have that number with me right now. What we did is we did that first before we proposed what the increase would be. So that was built into their original budgets to plan for that. So I will
Okay.
go back and.
Well, I just think for the benefit, Camille, of the council, just make sure that there's a couple of things that's happening here, so we need to make sure we understand what's happening. One is that they're going to get their merit increase, because the budget basically says they're going to get their 2.5 to 3.75 merit increase. For Rec and Public Works, they're going to also get, best guess based on the numbers, they're going to probably see at least an 8 or a 10% increase, whatever that number is, increase in salary. So all of that adds up in terms of how much in the budget increase are this going to cost. And so when you make a decision on the budget, which you just need to know this information, it includes then this salary increase.
Yes, they
And-
are included in the proposed budget that.
Yeah,
we gave you.
my question to you would be is, what was that increase? So if you can just tell me, I'm not saying that I agree or disagree, I'm just saying is just make sure you understand what that increase is going to be if you approve the budget. It's in there, but I just make sure we understand what that cost is, okay?
So even though it sounds like a lot though, Camille, it was planned on a rotational basis, is that correct?
Yes, that was the intent, I believe back in 2011 or 2012.
Yeah, yeah, but let me just make sure we have that clear. The argument had always been, and it was an argument up until this year, do you basically go with the salary survey, or do you basically go with the merit increase? It was always one or the other, okay? And we didn't chose, the final recommendation that came to us was, as a council is that it would be the merit increase. And that is every year, there's a 2 to 3.75 merit increase for every employee.
But
But
there
it-
was an additional 3-year rotation.
No.
So
We talked through this many times, I'm telling you.
So some cities give a COLA as well as a merit. And
That's
Roy
correct.
is not given a COLA. So the purpose of the salary survey is to compare to those 10 other cities.
That's correct.
And then adjust basically for the COLAs to adjust. So the merit increase only gives an average employee that merit increase on where they're currently at. It doesn't move the pay scale because it's not a cost of living adjustment.
But we basically did that. In fact, I remember very clearly, and I apologize, we got 2 new chiefs here. A couple of years ago, the police department came into the council and said, we're losing people. And the city council back then, and I was there, I'd seen it or heard it, basically said, we're going to give the police department an increase. And they did. Last year, okay, and years get crowded here, Matt, so help me. Last year, okay, and many of you were in that, the fire department, I think had a plan, but stood up here, one of the members stood up here, and the council gave the fire department an increase in salary. And the intent is that we wanted to try to spread them out, so they're a little bit further in the spreading out, so that a person walking in, okay, wasn't getting almost as much pay as the person who's been here, has got 5 years. And so we set that out. And the issue with rec and public works is that besides the merit increase, I don't remember any time, except trying to spread you out, that there was ever anything in the last few years. But the original plan when I walked in here as a city council member, and that gives you an idea how long it was we should have a salary survey. We should have a salary survey. But until this day, unless you tell me otherwise, this is the first time that the council's approving a salary increase under this salary data. Up to this point, it was not approved. It was more considered go with the merit. And so we did. And I remember holding merit increases back as a decision. Just hold it back because we didn't have the money. And then we just released them in January because the sales tax revenue was higher than what we basically have. So we went and backdated the merit increases for everybody. Every employee, unless they're based on some disciplinary action, got a merit increase every year. And I remember Jason, as the city manager, used to complain to me. He says, well, gee, you're a government retired employee. And he says, you got your COLAs every year. And I said, wait a minute. I'm a federal retired employee, but I'll tell you what the COLA was for me. It was like 0.2, 0.5, maybe 1%. We never got anything close to that, ever. But we says we're going to take care of the people. And the only difference, and that's the reason why I just want to make sure we have an understanding here, the only difference that basically took place was this year, what's being put on the table, and it's a good conversation, council, is both the salary increase, which should happen, and a merit increase, so they can get both. And that's, as far as I can tell, in everything I've read, with the exception, basically because there was an emergency issue that took place both in the fire department and the police department, this is the first time we've actually put in motion that we're going to take a third of the employees and actually put them in a salary program by which we can match it to what is in fact going. Up till this time, rec and public works were not in that process, but I specifically know that the police department needed it. They were losing too many people, and the council approved their needs and did, and they still got their merit increases, and so did the fire department in the last couple of years. So, all I'm asking, and it's just a reasonable question, set aside the merit increases. What is the salary effort survey cost going to be in addition to what we're currently paying? It's just a solid number. It could be an estimate. Just make sure that we have that in the conversation so you know what this is going to be, okay?
Can I ask a question on that, though?
Please.
So my understanding was that would be on a rotational basis.
Every 3 years now.
Okay, so we have taken care of the fire, we have taken care of the
But
police.
they weren't put in the same program. They had a good argument, and they figured it out, and I think they probably
I
used
thought
the
they
salary.
just jumped out of order.
Oh, they jumped.
They
Big-
did, though.
Yes.
They did.
So going back,
Oh, yeah.
this is the order that it should go in. Public Works and Parks and Rec. And then the second year was anticipated that it would be public safety. But because fire jumped ahead, we've moved them to year 3.
Okay.
So we're recommending this year that you approve Public Works and Parks and Recreation. Next year, we'll do the same in-depth analysis.
Right.
That's what was missing in the previous years is
Right.
there were amounts given, but it wasn't this in-depth analysis to see where it really needed to be adjusted to.
Exactly.
So next year, we will do that in-depth analysis for the police department and all of administration. And then year 3 will be fire and part-time personnel.
That's
and
correct.
then we recommend repeating those. So
Every
that
year.
So can I ask on that then, Camille, then, so let's say that we feel like we're losing a lot of fire next year, but we would say this is not your year.
Yes, that would be the recommendation and the intent.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. That makes more sense than what we've done just by presentation.
Oh, I agree, Jan, and I will tell you, it's a shocker when the chiefs stood in front of us, and I apologize, chiefs, you weren't the one standing, but they made a compelling argument. And we're talking about literally the public safety of this entire city. And they were losing people left and right. And the council stepped up to the challenge, took the vote, and gave them what they said they needed. Now, this process is different Because this now simply says we're not going to put it necessarily in a situation where we basically have to be reactive. We're going to plan this thing out. And this is the plan of how to do that. The only thing that's important to me is what is it going to cost? That-
My
that's it.
understanding, I'm sorry to keep belaboring this, but my understanding is that we did set that plan, but that it got,
It was always delayed
Derailed.
because of lack of funding.
Yeah, it's just,
We'll have to go back, but my understanding, and I know speaking with Ross, was fairly similar. I thought the understanding was we would look at this annually, we'll pick multiple departments and look at it annually, and it would be decided almost like a cost of living. That because we would go multiple years without that, it would allow us to stay in that structure. We had some challenging years. We had one year where people did get jumped and it led to a lot of hard feelings.
oh, yeah.
This now, I think, is what I took from however long ago it was, Mayor. I'm like you, the years are kind of starting to blend together, is to put us back on the original track. of the
Correct.
plan.
that's what I.
Correct.
So they get a
Yes.
yearly merit increase, and every 3 years, it's a salary true up. Correct.
Yes.
And if.
That-
for
that's a
some
good way to
reason
state
worked
it,
out
Joe.
that there wasn't raises because we were still where we needed to be, then that's what it would be. If it is, you know, as my boy here is losing 80% of a workforce in a year, you know, because we're not as competitive as we used to be.
Right. That was the whole point.
How do we decide where we place ourselves when we take that salary?
So we
Survey.
have just been taking the average. We look at those 10 cities and we just go straight down the middle and do the average. We take out any outliers that are more than 20% above or below the average, and then we just take the average.
So
Thank
in
you.
theory, in 3 years, you're gonna take the same survey and you're going to give the employees the average COLA of the surrounding areas around us. So they'll get their merit and then they'll get the average COLA of all cities around us. So if cities don't do a COLA and don't move their salary range up for whatever reason, then that will bring down that average COLA.
Right.
So we're not every year trying to come up with a cost of living for everybody.
Pretty similar to what we just did in the sewer board.
Yeah, it makes sense. The only thing, and I'll close with this comment on this issue, was only the fact is that we talked about this for the last 3 or 4 years. We never did implement it,
No,
ever.
I think the issue has always been is that the priority was set with the merit and the steps schedule because we spent so much money
Right.
and effort in fixing that compression within the city. And then, but the problem is that not doing any type of salary adjustment or COLAs, that's why you see the salaries scale so low. And so they drop and drop and other cities are increasing it and now we're, the bottom of the package.
Yeah, but you would agree that the merit increases should have helped balance that, and it appears it didn't.
With retention, it helps, but with recruitment, having that low starting salary is where it hurts. So if you were asking for a public works officer to come in at an EO1 at $14.55 an hour and everybody else is just seeing we're making,
15
you
something.
can go to, I don't know, Ogden for $15.52 or whatever, or South Ogden for $17.
Right.
It's so much harder to get a new employee in.
Right.
And so like a lot of Ross's employees in the streets department that he was losing, they'd literally be here for a month, 2 months, and then they would just quit because they would get another job. But they're only making $14 an hour.
Yeah.
We would train them and we would get them certified to higher credentials and then lose them to other
Lose 'em.
places.
Yeah. Okay. Could you get us a number?
Yes.
Thank you.
The capital vehicle purchases we talked about in the budget presentation. We also are proposing 5 vehicles in the annual rotation program. We are proposing some of these vehicles will be sold, as we've done in the past with the Public Works Director and Public Works Deputy Director. We are also proposing that with the Parks and Recreation Director vehicle. The other vehicles will most likely be moved to other departments that need them, that could use an older vehicle so that we can continue this
Cascade 'em so
rotation.
you get rid of the older ones in the
Yes.
fleet and keep fresher vehicles in.
But help me with that, because there was, the original strategy that we talked about would be is that since you're doing a fleet purchase, we could purchase the vehicle, use it for a year, change the tires, fill it up with gas, and sell it at the end of the year and make as much, if not more money on the sell to purchase the next one. That strategy was for those vehicles that were involved, it would fundamentally then keep a new vehicle, okay, in the mix, okay, with these positions. I'm not talking about big utilities. You do it in your job, or
And
did.
I'll tell you, we're making bank right now in selling.
Yeah.
vehicles.
So my comment is that, is this a change? Because I just heard that some of those vehicles now are going to be moved, okay, back.
Current vehicles. So we currently are not, the Deputy Parks and Recreation Director is not currently in this program. So
Okay.
the vehicle she is currently driving would go to another department and then would start the rotation on her vehicle.
Okay.
That's a 2013 Ford is what she's currently driving. So
Okay.
we could sell it, but we want to utilize it in
Yeah,
internal.
okay.
So
I would just
this-
want to make sure we have an understanding in terms of the strategy, because I liked the strategy. It made sense.
We're just adding more to the
So
strategy.
we're adding
That's
more
right.
to the fleet.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah.
So
And it was
instead
not
of-
clear in your package in terms of which ones were basically being bought as new as part of the replacements to renew every year, and how many was just being, I guess, just,
Basically,
Replaced.
because your admin vehicles that aren't being modified every year, if you have to add modifications to it, that
Oh,
affects the
yeah.
ability to flip it. But if you're dealing with admin vehicles that don't have modifications on them, you can buy them and sell them yearly and break even, or, I mean, we're selling Toyota Tacomas that are 3 years old with 50,000 miles on them.
Yeah.
We're making more than what we paid for 'em.
exactly. And that was a great plan. I just hope Matt, I hope you're basically following that plan. It was not clear in your package, okay? The only thing I seen was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brand-new vehicles. And maybe your intent would be all 5 of those, but I could have sworn that the Public Works Director truck that he's driving now was in that plan.
Yes.
And I thought that the Recreational Director's vehicle was in that plan already.
And so every year you're going to see in this plan, you're going to see an offset in revenue and then the expenditure. So you're always going to have to expense that, and then you have a revenue offset. So when you
That's right.
meet it together, it's going to be a net zero.
So I have a question about that in city budgeting, maybe government budgeting. So we do that, but we budget a project budget. So we budget the difference of what we bought it versus what we sell it for. Can you not budget that in a government budget?
We have to
No,
budget the full
unless-
cost of the expense.
Okay, so where's that revenue going to be generated then? Because my question really was, it says, where will you show that revenue?
In the general fund, there's a sale of assets line item.
Okay, so it comes in at that point, so whatever value you can buy it for.
And then
Okay.
we, again, true that up because we don't want to plan on revenue that we don't know if by chance the market fell out and we couldn't get as much. So we always bring that back as a budget adjustment once
Okay.
we've sold them to true up how much we actually
You
receive.
evaluate it every year,
Yes.
see what the market's bearing.
Okay.
I mean, right now, the used car market's on fire because you can't get new vehicles.
Exactly. Great time to sell.
I don't anticipate, based on what we do, and I mean, we do 10,000 vehicles a year, I don't anticipate that in the next year to 2 years changing. But at some point, when they get caught back
There will
up,
be a correction.
then
Yeah.
you'll have to evaluate it for, at that point, of what it's worth.
Okay,
We had capital projects that were requested that we are not recommended to fund. So these are not in the budget. We are not recommending that they're funded this year. We had to prioritize the requests. The requests that we put in the budget before you are our highest priorities and our recommendation. But some of the requests that were not funded were $700,000 for a fire department ladder truck, about $135,000 to remodel this courtroom, city council chambers, $102,000 to do the city building back parking lot, $717,000 at the complex for upgrades and remodels, $305,000 for aquatic center upgrades, and about $1.2 million in parks and recreation requests.
Come on, Travis, you can do better than that. 1.3? I hear 2?
okay.
1.5? I
That
do
was,
have one question on that, because there is a major expense at the top of that is a public safety. Can you get by without it? Are we safe for another year, chief?
It needs to be replaced pretty soon, sir. And that's about half of what one ladder truck costs, so.
but this is, we purchased one recently, a brand-new ladder truck. This is the one, it's not the one here, it's the one, the station, the other station, is
That's a
that correct?
medical engine, it's not a ladder truck.
That's a fire engine at 32 that we bought 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the ladder truck is nearly 20 years old, so.
So it
Yeah,
was
the
a
one we
pumper
bought 3
truck,
years ago,
yeah.
the 6,000, we rapid funded because we were over 25%.
Yeah?
That was the new medical engine. It
No,
wasn't
wait a
ladder
minute.
truck.
Ladder trucks do, sir. But we'll work it in when we can.
Okay.
If you'll give me a few more minutes, I'll hurry through as many.
You've got roughly 1 minute. I've got to
Okay.
make sure we're ready to move into city council. Thank you.
Perfect. A question that we had was on credit card fees. Right now, we do not charge fees for anyone to use credit cards at the city. We encourage credit card payments. Our process for getting collection on unpaid checks is a hard process and actually costs more with the return check fees. So we would prefer people use credit cards to pay. As such, we can't charge based on just certain fees. We'd have to charge it across the board if we were to charge a credit card processing fee. And at this point in time, we don't feel it's worth it to charge a credit card processing fee on some of those lower transactions, but we're not allowed to charge it just on certain transactions. So at this time, we're just absorbing that as a cost of doing business.
That's pretty standard in the industry right now, dealing with checks and even dealing with cash.
Yes.
It's cost of business that's worth doing, so you're not dealing with the extra stuff.
We mentioned in the budget book about refunding the old water and sewer bonds and what a savings that has been. That's primarily due to the interest rate, because interest rates decreased so much over the past few years. Old rates on bonds, when you think about $5 million bonds or even higher, if you're thinking about interest rates of 8 to 10%, if we can get them down to 3 or 4%, that's where the savings really comes in, is renegotiating some of those terms. We also have in the budget a new HR programs line item. We talked about that for some wellness programs, mental health programs, things like that for the employees. We have broken out those costs. 91% are in the general fund in finance, 7% are in the water fund, and 2% are in stormwater. And that is based on the number of employees in each of those areas divided by the total number of employees. So those programs would be available for all the employees in every area.
You know, here's a disadvantage, and I'm 3 minutes out, Camille. Obviously, council, you have sent her some questions, and the rest of us have not seen them. So she's talking a lot of things to answer questions you provided, but I don't have a clue what you're talking about, okay? So we have a choice. So Matt, let's just real briefly talk about a choice, council. If you can collect all the questions they have and send some answers, then we all can go back and just verify our position on that. Some of the questions I ask are not answered. We can hold another workshop, or you can just simply collectively all the questions, give us an answer, and then I'll solicit back to you to simply says, do you want another workshop? Because on June 15th, we take a vote, okay? And any modifications or changes need to be infused into the final document you'll be voting on the 15th. I need that vote on the 15th. That's only 2 weeks away. So I appreciate the questions. The problem is I don't have a clue what you asked, and I can't map what you ask in terms of the document that I've got in front of me unless you show me. So help us connect all these dots, Camille, okay, over the next week. And then I'll ask you to basically provide back to us, okay, a decision council, whether or not you think you need to have another workshop to finish this, or whether or not the answers provided are adequate enough to be able to vote. You okay with that? Matt, the budget by law is yours, okay? If you'll just make sure that happens, get us some feedback on the questions. Like I say, I've got mine, Camille, but you're obviously answering some good questions. I've never seen the question. I don't have a clue what you're asking and where that's found in the document. So help us connect that, would you? Okay, thank you, okay?
Presentation, thank you, Camille.
Yeah, good
Thanks,
job.
Camille.
Thank you very
And a
much.
copy of that presentation would be perfect too, Camille. Okay, it had a lot of good information on it. Thank you. Okay, we're about 1 minute out, then we'll get started with our city council. Hey, Joe. How about,
I make a motion, we adjourn the
I'll
work
second it.
session.
I was just gonna do that.
I'll second.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Joe Paul for the adjournment, and the second by Diane. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This is your chance. Hearing none, we are adjourned from the work session. Thank you. And we got 1 minute to step into the city council meeting. I was going to ask you, Joe, if you'll consider giving us the Pledge of Allegiance today.
Moment of silence, too.
That too. Your recording moving, Morgan? You ready? Perfect. Thank you. I want to welcome everybody to the Roy City Council meeting we have tonight. This is June 1st, 5:30. We appreciate your attendance. Want to recognize that we have Councilmember Saxton with us tonight. We have Councilmember Burrell. We have Councilmember Wilson. We have Councilmember Jackson, and we have Councilmember Paul. We have a full quorum tonight. Again, we appreciate you joining us. We've asked Councilmember Paul if he will go ahead and lead us in a moment of silence and a Pledge of Allegiance. Joe?
Good evening and welcome to council meeting. If you'll please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you. If you'll please stand and give proper salute and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Councilmember Paul, thank you for leading us in that. Thank you. Okay, we do have a couple of consent items. First, I'm going to kind of break these up just a little bit, then I'll ask for a vote. This is the approval of the May 4th, 2021 Roy City Council meeting and the May 4th, 2021 Roy City work session. Do I have any corrections, comments about those? Any comments? Okay, I think you received, Morgan, my inputs, okay, in terms of those? Okay, and we also have the swearing in of the new police chief, Matthew Gwynn. Council, this decision is a review and consent. So when we vote on that, this motion, then obviously you're approving the approval of the new police chief. So with that,
Mayor, I make a motion that we approve the consent items along with bringing on a new police chief.
okay, I have a motion then to approve the consent items. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And Jan is the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. Now, guess what? We appreciate it. Matt, go ahead and introduce our new police chief, and we ask you to, at some time, if you would, introduce your family and friends that are here. Thank you.
So, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you know, we've been going through the process of hiring a new police chief after Chief Carl Marino retired. We went through a couple of rounds of interviews and strongly feel that Matt Gwynn would do the city very well. And he's already kind of jumped in and taken the lead. I'm fully confident in his abilities to lead that department to the next level. So thank you for the approval of Matt Gwynn. So
Perfect.
at this time, we're going to do the oath of office and make it official.
Yeah, this is the oath of office, so please join us. And who's got a camera? Oh, I see one coming up. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you. Perfect. I think there's a rumor here that a family member is going to pin on. If that's okay, Mayor. I think that's perfect. Wonderful.
this is my wife Shelley.
Hi, Shelley.
Got 4 girls. One's in Houston. She's working. This is Alexis, Ashlyn.
Perfect. Welcome. Congratulations.
Stay away from the juggler, even though we do have some firemen in the room.
Hey, Matt, before you sit down, would you mind, you've got lots of people here that are here for you. Would you just make maybe a couple of comments to them?
Yeah, I'm gonna pull a Danny Hammond if I don't get it out quick, so. 17 years here, Mayor. And at no point did I ever think I was actually gonna be in this position. So, I've had some phenomenal support. I've had a lot of encouragement. And I'm looking forward to a successful, at least next few years. They've been coming out and have been vocal about their excitement, and I'm hoping and expecting we're gonna get to do some great things together. I didn't prepare anything, that's about as formal as I We have nachos downstairs, so the sooner you get through your meeting, the sooner you can come have a bite with us. So, I appreciate it, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Council, do you have comments?
Thank you. We're glad you're here. Congratulations.
Thank you, Matt.
I appreciate your service, and I appreciate the support of the department behind you. It's awesome to see you come and welcome your new chief. That's wonderful. And family and friends, so look forward to working with you and keeping the city going.
And keep it in Roy City, because your in-laws grew up here too.
Okay. Well, Chief, it's great to have you. Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your efforts. Okay, well done. Thank you. Okay, council.
That's when the fun begins.
We do have a public comment period. If you have something you would like to share with us tonight, we'll go ahead and let some people exit.
They just come for the nachos.
I think they did. By the way, you did hear that invitation, council, downstairs.
Fastest way to a person's heart's through the belly.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Okay, hey, we now have public comment period. Anything you would like to talk about, anything you want to bring up, please join us at the mic. All we need is your name and address. Anybody? Okay. Kevin?
Good to be back.
It's good to be back.
Kevin Homer. I live in Roy at 5398 South, 4000 West. Couple of things. The IADU, which I believe is House Bill 82, is that correct?
82, that's
Yeah,
correct.
it was passed just this last spring by the legislature. One thing I would ask the council to remember is all the provisions in that bill, almost all of it is the city council may require permits. It's not must.
That's right.
So I would encourage you to use a great deal of restraint as you consider whether or not we should assess more permits and more licensing for businesses in our city. I would encourage you to not do that. I'm not a fan of cities permitting businesses. It's just me.
Okay.
The other is about, I appreciate the discussion that was had about the budget for the city. Specifically about the costs for the salary costs in the city, whether or not it's emergency services or Parks and Rec or administrative staff. I've kind of been through those discussions with other city councils in the area, and you're in competition with them. When we say that we have people that are interested in going somewhere else, most of the time, it's due to salary. So I would encourage the city to find a way not to do just yearly merit increases. And I appreciate the discussion about the comparative salary increases. But rather than have that be just once every 3 years, sure, let's do the study every 3 years to figure out what the other cities in the area are paying their employees. But let's take that number and every year give the comparative salary increase in addition to the merit salary increase. Do everything that we can to keep the good employees here. I'm retired now, but in a previous life, I had a lot to do with hiring and staffing and multi-million-dollar budgets for companies that I worked for. Salaries are generally about 50% of those budgets, compared with the hard costs like, cars and buildings and all those things. And I can guarantee you, we can find out what the numbers are, but it costs a whole lot less money, as our department heads here found out, a whole lot less money to retain people that we like, the good workers that we like, by in part paying them enough money for what they're doing here. So retaining the people, then to go out and find new people, recruiting them, having to train them, those costs are much higher than paying a good salary and retaining them. So
That's right.
as much as I don't like spending the money, I think this is one of those areas that it would be very good and appropriate for the city to spend money on the salaries.
Perfect.
So,
Okay,
thank
Kevin,
you.
thank you for your
Good
input.
comments, I appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else would like to share a thought with us? Okay, seeing none, we'll go out of the public comment period. We do have a couple of presentations. Andy, you're going to talk to us about our annual requirement for the Open and Public Meetings Act.
Here, I'll move down here so you can see me better than up
That's
there.
perfect. Thank you.
State law requires that we do this every year, have a training on the Open Public Meetings Act. So what I've done, I've prepared a synopsis for each of you rather than giving you the state code, which is kind of hard to decipher for anybody, okay? So this should make it a little easier. I'll go through a few things here. This act was created by the Utah State Legislature, and it said that we should take our deliberations, they should be in public for meetings rather than in private. When does it apply? It's whenever the council convenes with a quorum present, and if we're here doing the public's business. So at any time that that comes into play, then we have to have that open meeting. Now, what's a quorum? We've got to have 2 council members, anything with more than 2 council members and the mayor. That runs us into trouble. If we start discussing things, we have a problem. So it doesn't apply to chance meetings or social gatherings. It doesn't apply when we go to the Utah League of City and Towns meetings. It doesn't apply if we were at some kind of conference, if there was an investigation, school plays, funerals, things like that, and we're all there. We don't have to do any kind of notice provisions for that. If it can apply, though, when we have our executive sessions, our work sessions, our closed meetings, planning commission, some committees it does apply to. If we have an ad hoc committee that's only just providing some recommendations and isn't taking final action, we don't have to put out a public notice on that. So those are the typical situations that we have to have it. There are times when we can have closed meetings, but that's specific. It's defined by state code. I just have a brief list here of about 6 different items that I've put on here. So when we talk about character and competency of individuals, that's when we go into those closed meetings. Collective bargaining is something we don't do. We don't have unions here, so that doesn't really come up. If we're talking about purchase, sale, lease of property, and we're looking at appraisals, or if we're concerned about making the best deal possible, we can't really be talking about that in a public meeting. That's all out there for different people that wouldn't be appropriate, and we wouldn't get the best deal possible. So in those situations, we can have that meeting. Deployment of security, investigations of criminal misconduct, we can have those in a closed meeting also. Our regular meetings, though, we have to have a 24-hour notice. We also have to publish that once a year at the very beginning of the year. We can have special meetings. Those special meetings, we just give a 24-hour notice, and then we have our emergency meetings, too, which we give the best reasonable notice practical. In our meetings, written minutes of the recordings are required. In our closed meetings, they are too, except under certain circumstances, and that's usually character and competency of individuals. And in that situation, we don't have to keep the minutes. What we do is the mayor has to sign an affidavit saying that it was conducted for those purposes. So we always have to be careful when we have one of our closed meetings that we don't talk about any topic other than specifically what we can. So if we get off of that, we can get into trouble.
Right.
The requirements for closed meetings, those all have to be started with a roll call vote. We have to state the reason for it and the location, and then we have to have a 2/3 vote to go in it. So it's a little different than some of the other things that typically we will do. I think I mentioned that, at the meeting, yeah, we have to list everybody who's there. The mayor does a great job of this. We also have to list all the council members that are there and then all the council members that aren't present. We can't approve ordinances, resolutions, contracts. None of that can be done in a closed meeting. Now, we can talk about it and we can reach a recommendation, but that the final action has to take place out here in a public meeting in front of everyone. So we've run into that situation with personnel actions before where we've come to a conclusion, but we haven't had to come out and take final action because usually things get resolved in the meantime. One of the things we can't talk about we can't interview anyone for an elected position in a closed meeting. So I think some of you have been involved before in meetings where we have to do that interview right here in public. And it seems kind of awkward because while we're doing this meeting, somebody else who's applying for the job can just be sitting right back here in the audience. And, they can watch the whole procession all day long. And that's happened before. Yeah. So, but that's just something that we have to deal with. That's the way the code's written. One thing I wanted to tell you about, too, that's with our closed meetings, we're not supposed to discuss what happens in those closed meetings outside of that meeting. Now, and let me preface that a little bit. We can't talk to anybody about that closed meeting except all of us who are involved in it. So technically, though, if after that meeting was done, you could talk about it amongst yourselves with anybody who was a participant in there. And so maybe somebody who's the subject of that meeting was in there too. You could actually talk to them. We could discuss that closed meeting a week later, a day later, 10 hours later. We could have individual discussions about that. There's nothing that prevents us from doing that. But it's when you start talking to somebody who wasn't part of that meeting about it that creates a problem. So you have to be careful about that. We've run into that problem a little bit. What's interesting with state law, though, is that they don't put a penalty for that or address what happens when you go outside and talk to somebody else. So you can't charge anybody with a crime for doing that, but it's an ethical consideration. So they could come up on an ethics charge, which isn't a criminal matter, but we could always have an.
I have a question about that. There isn't a misdemeanor associated with that? Because we were just given a presentation, the sewer board, that talked about discussing public meeting information outside of a public meeting, that it could be a misdemeanor.
It's not,
Okay.
okay? And what's happened, and I've gone over it with Dave Church, because we've actually run into that situation before. So what's unique for violations of the Open and Public Meetings Act, that is a Class B misdemeanor, okay? But when you look at this specific thing, they don't have anything in the code
Maybe
that
that's-
talks about conversations outside, disclosing that. So that's where you run into it being an ethical thing. So we have run into that situation before, and it's interesting how to treat it, because you're going, hey, this isn't right, but okay, it doesn't specifically call that out in the code. Where do we go? We take it to an ethics issue.
Right.
Now, violations of, well, if we took a final action in a closed meeting that we aren't supposed to, then we run into a situation where anybody who wants to file a complaint about that, they have 90 days to do that. And they can file a suit. The city can be liable for court costs and attorney's fees. It can be enforced by the Attorney General or any county attorneys for that matter. Any violations are Class B misdemeanors. So again, that's the problem with the talking outside. It doesn't really address talking outside of it. So, and disclosure of information that's discussed in a closed meeting, it could also be a violation of grandma. So typically everything that's discussed in there is a protected record. So the minutes that are done of those meetings, that's protected. So you have two different areas where you could run into some problem. Not just the ethics violation, but you could be with a grandma situation. And then I have on here, I've mentioned something about electronic meetings. I think that was more initially when I first prepared this at some time, but it allows council members under the Open and Public Meetings Act, you don't necessarily have to be here to participate. You can participate electronically.
Right.
So that's all I have. If you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer those questions.
Council, any questions? Okay.
And then I'd tell you, if you have any questions like that, please feel free to contact me. And in some other reading that I've done talking about the city attorney's role, I'd just like to bring up one thing that I think is really helpful for us. When we have council meetings, there may be questions that you see or you may anticipate coming up. All the city attorneys and some of the literature I've read, what they say is a great thing to do is feel free to call me, and you can call me in advance, because it's really quite difficult for us sometimes to answer a question, spur of the moment right there where we don't have a chance to research it. So there's that temptation to shoot from the hip. Some things we may know right off the top of our head, but if there's an interesting issue that's coming up, boy, there's nothing wrong with giving me a call in advance and saying, hey, Andy, what's the legality on this? Can we do this? Can we not? I'm more than happy to do that, and some of you do that, and I really appreciate it. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate the input. Okay, we do have another presentation, the Roy Water Conservative District. Who's going to be talking this one? You can give us your name and address.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Rodney Banks. I'm the General Manager of Roy Water Conservancy District. So I've, just really quickly, I've had the opportunity to read the Resolution 21-11 that'll be considered by the Council this evening. First off, I just want to say we very much appreciate the support that is worded in the resolution. And one thing that we would ask that the council consider is that the culinary water be restricted as well to no watering outside between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. And there's many reasons for this. One of the reasons is that it helps in uniformity in the messaging that all of us are, putting out there, whether it be us as the Roy Water Conservancy District, Weaver Basin Water Conservancy District, it really doesn't, Pineview Water, whoever supplies your secondary water, it just really helps in the uniformity in messaging. So we would respectfully ask that you take that into consideration in your future discussions. But again, we really appreciate this resolution and the support that it gives to us in our efforts for water conservation. Now, why is this important for you folks? Well, the reality is that the drought is so extreme this year. We're down about 45 to 50% in our normal water supply. So what is that going to mean? Well, it means that we may run out of water this year, secondary water. So how that affects you folks is that people may be starting to use culinary water outside. That could affect your supply, however that affects you. So with that, we've also talked with Hooper Water Improvement District. I know one of the concerns is enforcement, and that is a concern that we have as well. I mean, we have a resolution in place at the district that we're able to use in order to enforce our watering guidelines. Hooper Water Improvement District, I understand, talking to their general manager, that they also have that same restriction of no watering between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. With their culinary water supply. So if there is a little bit of a concern there, Hooper Water already does that. The concern that was brought up to me with enforcement, just as a note, we've had this resolution in place for 8 years at the district, and in those 8 years, we've only had to fine 2 people the $50 fine, which is the second violation. We typically don't have to take it to the level of a third violation. Now, this year may be an exception to that. We are serious in that so far the trend shows that our customers are using more water than we have a supply for. So unfortunately, October 1st may be coming a little sooner. It could be coming September 1st. We just really don't know. This is an unprecedented drought situation. And I know it's a situation where it seems like we're always in a drought. Well, we live in a desert, and there are some realities there. But this year, it is an extreme drought. If you can imagine, in Davis and Weber County's Canal Company, which is where we get our water from, they haven't seen this in the 120 years of data that they have. There's some other comparable years. If anyone remembers 1977, I do, but I was a little younger then. But that was an extreme drought year as well. But this one is very unique. And what makes it unique is in the snowpack, what unfortunately happened is that the ground was so dry, and this is up in the high elevations, that the snowpack actually absorbed into the ground instead of running off to our reservoirs. So that means that we have a less than a 15% runoff, 15% of normal, very abysmal. So anyway, I would be happy to answer any questions that you have for me. And
Perfect. So. Council, questions, comments?
So I agree. I saw down in St. George that they changed it to 10 to 8 at night that you can't water. Think that's something that we should do?
Typically, those types of restrictions are in southern Utah is because they are so much hotter than we are up here. Right now, between 10 and 6 is what the Utah State University is the university that does a lot of research related to this, and they're still recommending the 10 to 6 restriction.
So it's hard to tell who has secondary and who has culinary water. I mean, I see people watering in the middle of the day all the time. How do we get the word out to,
Well, I think where he was headed is if our policy or our resolution mirrors the sub-conservancy districts. And that's what I sent out in the email today, is saying we need to change our resolution so we're mirroring what they say.
Right.
So regardless of who's watering during the day, if anybody's watering during the day, whether it's city water or secondary water, that it is enforceable. Whether, if they run across a property that ends up being a city water, they can either kick it to us and let us do it, or they could still pass on a letter, notify us, same thing. I think see something, say something. If you see somebody watering in the middle of the day, regardless of whatever water they have, bring it to the attention of the city, and we work with the Conservancy District to determine where the enforcement's at.
But don't you think we should restrict it to maybe, not, because I know I have a lot of elderly neighbors, and the sprinkler people come and set it, and it like waters every other day or whatever. And I just think maybe twice a week, the most, and
Right now, the state puts out a watering guide, and we actually have our own recommendations for watering. Right now, we're actually recommending just once a week. I mean, that's how dire our situation is. Now, once it does get into the hotter months, we generally say Father's Day. This year might be a little bit sooner. I mean, if it really gets 97 on Friday, like the weather forecast says, at that point, it would be twice a week. But it would be twice a week until, say Labor Day.
Right.
For a significant amount of time, which is, that's more of a restriction than we've had before.
I think to your point, and it may be something, Councilmember Jackson, that needs to be assessed would be maybe a lot of people just don't know how to set it. And so, or they just put an auto and it just runs like it did last year, once every other day, and it's never changed. The guidance that's being proposed today suggests is that they don't water between 10 and 6. But that doesn't suggest in anywhere we're seeing that talks about, well, we really need to be falling back into what's right for the climate in the area, which is once a week and not every other day. And so there's some holes in our process, and I think a lot of people who may not necessarily have the understanding of how the system works could use some help to help them to figure out what their system needs to be set to be able to meet the requirements. And so I know there's some technology out there today that can do that. But I think a lot of people probably don't have that technology or knows exists. And so I think you open the door to another problem that we have about how to get this message out.
Yeah. And along those lines, Weber Basin Water Conservancy District, because, they cover 5 counties, they actually have rebate programs in place.
Oh.
So for instance, the Orbit Beehive controller, which is a fairly popular one, you can get it for about $100, and they'll rebate $50 of that.
Okay.
The state was actually rebating up to 75. I don't know if that's still open. I got in on that, and by the time I was done, it cost me less than $20.
Yeah. A lot of times it's 50-50, but yeah, you may have gotten in on a better one. So.
Interesting. Okay. Council, other comments, questions? Okay, let me just ask, Rodney, appreciate this. I do believe the Roy Water Conservative District does hire a temporary person in the summer.
That's correct. We have a person that we started probably a month ago, and he goes around. We really are in the business of water education, and that's one of the primary focuses, is that we want to try to educate people. In a situation like this year, maybe the stick is a little bigger, but the purpose is that he wants to go around and help people understand what the proper usage is. And he's just one person, as well. But speaking to the uniformity of messaging, so whenever he does come across someone who is using culinary water, he walks away, because that's not our jurisdiction. We're not going to step on anyone's toes. And again, that's why we're asking for the uniformity in messaging. That just helps. I think it helps everyone, because we have almost 11,000 connections, which is, fairly substantial. There's, at a best guess, there's maybe, 2,000, probably less than that aren't connected to us as secondary water.
So with that, it sounds like the individual will go out if they witness what appears to be a problem. The challenge would be to make a distinction between whether that's secondary water's jurisdiction or whether it's culinary water's jurisdiction.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, we can do that at the snap of a finger. We have the customer database.
Okay,
It's our customers.
Yeah.
And so we know. I mean, we just have to look in our customer database, and we know that if you're connected to us, it's secondary water. If you're not connected to us,
You
as
assume
I
it's
say, we walk away.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
If you did walk away, is that something you could, like I say, pitch to us and let us know, hey, we observed this, and then
Yes. Very much so. I
So we
mean,
can coexist together.
we feel like we're in this together. If you did adopt a resolution that, you know, but no watering between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., yes, we would. You know, we would, you know, say, hand out the flyer that you want us to hand out or something like that. We don't have a problem with that.
So I have a question in regards to the protocol. You kind of alluded to, they make for the first report, they make a visit, do education, and then if they have a second report, then they fine $50, and that's the way the program is currently for this year as well?
Currently, it is, yes. And just so everyone's aware, we will most likely be considering some more restrictions in our next board meeting. So it may be a little more heavy-handed.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, I think I remember reading somewhere that if it's the third time, you actually have the authority to shut it off.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so to your point, Diane, warning, financial penalty on the second, third time, they just turn the valve off and you're off the system. So, I mean, it can go that severe. It sounds like you've not had to do that, but
We
this
haven't
may
had
be
to
the
do that
exception.
yet, no.
It is a little tougher with culinary water. I think we may have to step up education and working with them a little bit more. But I think what I'd propose in the resolution is we mirror whatever their proposal and guidance is. So we don't have to write it. We just mirror what they say because they're the experts in the water business.
Well, and that's a good point, but counsel, we better have this conversation because, Matt, unless you tell me otherwise, or Andy, we don't have an ordinance here for this. There is no governance not even in this resolution to what we're talking about is being proposed. And so if you think what we just heard is serious enough, and it surely sounds like it is, then I want you to ask a hard question. Should we be talking about establishing an ordinance that allows this to happen? Because you're the law. Today, that resolution as written is simply suggestive. I'm kind of hearing, I've seen your documents, and I surely have seen other documents similar. You have a little bit of authority in your document. You're a district, and you can do just exactly what you said. If you want to shut them off, you can do that. I'm not so sure Royce City can do that today on a watering violation. So we need some,
Well, yeah.
Well, and
can't
you may
shut
not be
someone's
able to.
culinary water off because they still have to flush their
I
toilet.
understand, but you understand the challenge. So, but the
Yeah.
point I want to suggest here is that, well, let's talk about it when we get into the resolution, but I think we just need to make sure we understand exactly what we want to walk out of here with and how do you want to do that? And that may be a little more complex. So we just need to think this one through.
Are you still selling when someone builds in Roy, do they still get to hook up to secondary water?
Yes, they can. So anyone who is connected to just culinary, we've reached out to a certain number of people just by word of mouth. People have come in, and we've actually had probably roughly 600 or so of those connections in the last 9 years or so. And so yes, I mean if anyone wants to come in, we can connect them to the system. They have the opportunity to do that. People have chosen not to, and others have.
I guess one of the things, I know the legislator's been pushing you a little bit about metering on secondary. Any ideas of where that is?
Yeah, so currently we have about 878 meters within our district boundaries. So we have a long ways to go, as you can imagine, to reach 11,000. And very expensive, it's very expensive, it really is. But we are chipping away at it. And that's been a good thing. Weber Basin's had a wonderful experience with metering and helping people understand their water use. And it makes sense. You really can't control what you don't know. Right?
Yeah, great information. Okay, council, any other questions, comments?
Well, yeah, just a quick one. On this resolution, that's been prepared, we can amend that, right, to say culinary?
Yeah, I mean, we can do some amendment here in terms of verbal.
Yeah, but right now, we're in a.
Yeah, we're going to get to that
presentation.
one
We're
here in a
not
second,
discussing
Brian,
the
but,
resolution.
yeah. But I just want to make sure before we jump into the resolution, is there anything else that Rodney can provide to us, or any information that he hasn't?
Well, yeah, it's got to be fixed.
Okay, everybody okay? Okay, great information. Thank you. I've got notes here. I have no idea. Okay, this is
Thank you
good
for your time.
information.
And anytime you have questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah. Okay, Rodney. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Council, we do have an issue coming, and it appears to be bigger than Dallas. Okay. We have one action item. This one talks about Resolution 21-1, acknowledging the existence of a drought condition and recommending compliance with water restriction measures. Andy, you're going to lead us through this one?
Sure, Mayor. What we did, it's what we were requested to do on this, and we've acknowledged that there is a drought and there's a serious condition that's here in Roy. We have two different districts that apply or provide secondary water for us. The Weber Basin and the Roy Water Conservancy District provide that. So in this resolution, we're putting out support for that. We're saying that to the citizens, that we should follow the recommendations that they have and that they also should do what the governor has recommended. Also, we included that there are some things that might be good for the citizens to know. There's a Slow the Flow website that really has some good things with it. It mentions that there's free water checks and free evaluations, and you can go to that either of those two websites to sign up for that. So that'd be nice for the citizens to know that they could do that. There's also one of the websites gives you a weekly watering update, so you can check that and you can adjust accordingly. What this doesn't do, and what's been proposed, we don't provide secondary